Hi everyone, my name is Alex Crease. I'm an engineer by training, and I work at Formlabs, a 3D printing company in the Boston area. Little about me, I graduated from Olin College of Engineering as a robotics engineer in 2016, and since then I've mostly been working in the 3D printing industry, first at Markforged, a company that creates high-strength metal and composites 3D printers, and now at Formlabs, a 3D printing company that focuses on high-detail, high-precision 3D printers. What I do is I essentially work with engineers and manufacturers all over the place to implement new 3D printing technologies into their workflows. So I do a lot of work teaching people how to design for 3D printing and what aspects of 3D printing will be most valuable to their work to help them succeed and help their company prosper. Outside of work, I'm a mechanical engineer as part of Team Valkyrie on the Discovery Channel's BattleBots TV show. If you haven't heard of BattleBots, it's a really exciting TV show where basically teams of engineers build 250-pound robots to fight in a tournament-style competition. So here's a little clip showing one of our fights. Our team, Team Valkyrie, has been competing on BattleBots for the last 3 seasons, and we've had some really amazing, incredible, destructive fights. This last season, we won the Most Destructive Robot Award, and we got all the way to the top 16 in the bracket. It's been a really great way to put some of my engineering knowledge to the test and continuously learn, practice, and grow. So today, I'll be talking with all of you about how 3D printing has shaped the manufacturing industry, how I see manufacturing advancing with 3D printing, and at the end, I'll chat a little bit about my BattleBots experience and how robotics is a great way to practice and learn engineering and gain some amazing new experience. Now, when I was in high school and college, 3D printing was really starting to take off. A lot more companies were making 3D printers, a lot more people were talking about it, and what really attracted me to the technology is that it's a fundamentally different way of making parts. So some traditional processes include forming processes like injection molding or casting or even sheet metal bending, where you're molding raw material into a shape, often with raw molten material. Subtractive manufacturing, so this covers things like machining, where you're cutting away material from a shape to make your final part. Both of these processes require a lot of tooling and a lot of setup, and usually large machines or large pieces of equipment to be able to actually to make them work and make them produce parts. But 3D printing shapes parts by fusing raw material layer by layer into a model. And the entire technology ends up being more accessible and doesn't require a lot of the setup and a lot of the tooling and overhead that more of the traditional manufacturing processes have. So compared to these traditional processes, 3D printing allows for so much design freedom for a far lower cost, and at the same time, it's a very accessible way to produce parts. You send the printer a file, it produces this part without any sort of tooling or any sort of hands-on setup that you need to do, and it does it very quickly. So the whole technology and the whole process becomes really accessible, so it makes it much easier for anyone to make any sort of part that they want. And 3D printing has been around for a lot longer than many people realize, since the 1980s in fact, but it's really only started making an impact on the manufacturing industry in the last few years. That's because advances in the technology since then have made printers more affordable and easier to use, with new materials that are strong enough to match the ones that companies are actually going to be using regularly day to day. Now, I know this is a recorded presentation, but I want you all to think for a minute about where you've seen 3D printers and what you've seen 3D printed parts used for. What does a 3D printer look like to you? Does it look like this? Or does it look like this? Or is it somewhere in between? And when you think about 3D printed parts and what they're used for, do you think about models and trinkets? Or do you think about incredibly complex parts like metal 3D printed spacecraft brackets? Or is it somewhere in between? Now, what a lot of people talk about when it comes to 3D printing is one of these two extremes. Lower-end 3D printers like these ones are widely used by hobbyists to print things like models and trinkets for fun, and higher-end printers, industrial machines that might need their own room or their own facility to run, can print in advanced materials like metals and composites when you really need that complexity. For example, this part over here, here's a larger photo of it. In spaceflight, an extra pound of weight can mean thousands of dollars added because one extra pound means more fuel that you need to have, more support structures in the rocket that you need to have. So investing in some of these very expensive 3D printing materials or expensive printers ends up saving costs in the long run because it saves money on fuel and it saves money on support and structure of spacecraft. So advanced 3D printers that can print parts like these end up being really valuable for these very, very high-end niche applications, but they end up actually saving money in the long run. But in general, we do have these two extremes, but that's not how most businesses end up actually using 3D printers. And while it's really exciting, it's not reflective of the majority of applications of 3D printing in the workplace. So there's a huge range of 3D printers and applications of 3D printing that are used in engineering and manufacturing today that aren't really talked about. And this is where you, as young people, can add a lot of value as you enter the workforce to help these businesses get their products to market faster. And so 3D printing is really valuable in three key ways for many, many businesses and companies that are making things. In one regard, 3D printing is used for prototyping, where you can quickly design and iterate on models of a new product very quickly. 3D printing is also used a lot as tooling and fixturing, so helping a manufacturing line get up to speed as quickly as possible requires a lot of different tools and parts and jigs and fixtures that if you're using traditional processes will end up taking a long time. So 3D printing is really, really valuable building out tooling and fixturing for manufacturing lines. And then kind of the third area where 3D printing really helps businesses is in creating customized parts for specific use cases that might be unique to the end user. So things like prosthetics are a great example of 3D printing being used in companies and in businesses to create these customized products that you really wouldn't be able to make other way. So designing a new product can take a whole lot of work. This is kind of the four-step design process that I like to use. Step one is to identify the problem. Step two is to design that solution, whether that be the mechanical design or whether that be the like what the software is going to be like, whether that be what the electronics are going to be like. Step three is going to be manufacture the design, so actually taking your design and building it in the real world. And step four is going to be testing. And testing is always really important because that's when you get feedback. That's when you learn. That's when you know what worked and what didn't. And you always want to apply what you've learned from your testing back to your design cycle and iterate over multiple revisions so that your design continuously improves. And this happens time and time again in product development, but the bottleneck is always going to be manufacturing, because usually when you send a design out to get machined, it can take 4 to 6 weeks. And so you spend a lot of time waiting for parts to come in. And that's why 3D printing is really important, because instead of spending 4 to 6 weeks once you send your design out to a manufacturer to get it back and have it and assemble it, test it, and then feed it back into the next iteration, if you have a 3D printer on site, you can have your parts in as little as 1 to 2 days, and then you can go through many more testing cycles in the same amount of time. So 3D printing really improves the design workflow that companies go through to help them work faster, iterate more, and end up with higher quality, better designs because they've been able to go through all these very quick iteration cycles without having to wait long periods of time for parts to come back. One of the reasons why that's possible now is because of advances in 3D printing materials. So modern 3D printing materials usually match the strength of the plastics and the metals that are used in production settings at a very affordable price point. So we can print in materials like nylon, ABS, polycarbonate, and many, many more. Other materials might not be exactly the same one-to-one as some of these production materials, but usually end up being able to match the properties. So there's 3D printing resins can be designed to match properties of materials like ABS or TPU, and even some 3D printers can print parts that are as strong as metals with fiber reinforced plastics. And this basically allows you to not just test, does a component fit the right way? Does it look the right way? Does it feel the right way in your hands if you're designing a product that someone's going to interact with a lot? But also, is it going to perform the right way? So there's a huge range of affordable 3D printers and 3D printing materials that allow businesses to actually test products or test their designs in the ways that they'd be tested in the field, and make sure that they're going to be strong enough before they send them out to get manufactured in larger quantities. And that's kind of the next step, is ramping up manufacturing lines. And while 3D printing hasn't gotten to the point yet where we can print tons and tons and tons of parts per day to kind of replace injection molding or very high volume processes like injection molding, 3D printing is still going to be really valuable in other ways, and that's because of the quick turnaround and because of the material strength. If you're working for an engineering company and you're designing a product, after you've gotten through that kind of prototyping phase, you usually end up with a product that you're satisfied with, that you're ready to take to production. But that's a really big hurdle because you need to go from making one or two of them to thousands to hundreds of thousands of these pieces of equipment per year. So once you have a product you're ready to sell, you need to figure out how to make it in large quantities. And this involves building a lot of tools and investing in a lot of equipment to make the process as efficient as possible. So one example is injection molding. So you can see here, this is actually an injection mold for Lego bricks. This is how they make Lego bricks. And what happens is they put these injection molds into an injection molding machine, seen below here, and they inject these molds with plastic to form the Lego bricks themselves. And then and they basically can do this in like 30-second to a minute cycles, and the machines just repeat and repeat, and can crank out millions and millions of Lego bricks per month and per year. So designing each one of these tools, depending upon your product, is going to take time, and it's going to take more iteration cycles. One of the first assembly lines involved producing cars in this very kind of efficient workflow. So you'd have the frames of the cars rolling down this track, and different operators and technicians and manufacturers placing different parts from different parts of the process onto the car to build it in this very quick process. And now, decades and decades later, we have pretty much the same process, except a lot of it is automated, where we have the frame of a car rolling down a track, and we have different parts of the manufacturing process picking up all these other parts and putting them onto the car. But all of this takes a lot of work and a lot of infrastructure build out to make happen, because every single piece needs to be manufactured. Every single part that's going to be put somewhere else needs some sort of custom robotic arm or a gripper that will help align it and place it on the car. Every single piece needs to be inspected. So there's all these parts of the process that take time and take design work. Each piece of tooling needs to be designed. So that can include things like injection molds, bending dies if you're bending sheets of metal, soft jaws for holding parts in a milling machine if a part is being machined, welding fixtures for holding parts in a specific way as you're welding it together, inspection tools to make sure your parts are within your design specifications, assembly tools to help everything go together, packaging tools. And so there's lots and lots of examples of these. And if you're designing a complicated product, the more complicated it gets, the more of these different types of pieces of tooling and pieces of fixturing need to be designed. And each one of these tools takes its own cycle of design and manufacturing and testing before it's ready to get implemented in a production line. And things like injection molds, because they're made out of really strong materials, can take months to make. So here's a couple of examples of where 3D printing can help. In a lot of these applications, 3D printing is a great fit because it's really adaptable. You can evolve your designs very quickly, and there's this whole range of material properties that you have access to. For example, there's some materials that I work with today that can print and hold up as injection mold. So here's an example right here of an injection mold making a part. This was actually one of those ear saver strips for wearing face masks, and they were able to print this out, put it on an injection mold, and run it just like they would an injection mold with a steel mold. Another really great example of 3D printing on manufacturing lines is with industrial robotic arms. So if you have an arm like this that is handling handling some part of your design and moving it to a different stage of the process, then you can print out things like the grippers, the end effectors that actually grab the part that's being picked up, and those end up being really, really lightweight and really cheap and easy to make with a 3D printer, and they end up holding up a really long time. Another example is a drill jig. If you have a complicated hole pattern in a part, you can 3D print a drill jig that has those hole patterns, so you can use a drill and align your drill very easily with each of the holes that you need to drill out. So there's lots and lots of examples of these, and on the right over here, we have 3D printed vacuum forming molds. So if you're familiar with like packaging, plastic packaging and a lot of different products, a lot of the molds for that packaging have to be machined, and they often take a lot of time to make. You can 3D print those, and you can just put them on the vacuum former just like you would a machine mold, and they end up being a lot more cost effective and working just as well. Up here's another assembly fixture. So this printed piece actually sits on a conveyor belt that ends up running along basically a manufacturing line, and different parts get placed on it. So it's kind of an assembly fixture, and they need lots and lots of these because they're producing lots of parts. So all of these little bits of the process end up taking time. And if you're working with traditional manufacturing methods like machining, like other forming processes, this can take a good 2 or 3 years to get a full production line for a complicated part, a complicated product up and running smoothly. So if you're applying 3D printing in all of these key places where you need these custom parts that might take a long time to get back and to install on your manufacturing line, 3D printing can actually reduce the time it takes that manufacturing line to get up to speed by 50% or more. So this is really, really important because it means that applying 3D printing in all of these different ways where you're printing tooling, printing end effectors, printing different parts that can support a manufacturing line, even if you're not printing the final parts themselves, it helps companies get up to speed really quickly and get their products shipped out the door really fast. So it really shortens the amount of time that it takes manufacturers to make their products and to make them in high enough volumes that they can start selling them. So the last space I want to talk about in terms of 3D printing and manufacturing is in customized parts. So without the need for expensive tooling or machining processes, it's become really, really affordable to produce these custom parts that are designed specifically for one person. And a really valuable example of this is in prosthetics and orthotics, where every person might have a different need. Designing a custom socket, for example, here on the right, we have a custom socket that that is designed to fit specifically around this person's finger. This can apply to things like hands, prosthetic limbs, prosthetic knees. Building these custom solutions means a lot because each person's unique need is addressed and allows them to be able to do what they want to do and have the assistance that they need that's unique to them without having to compromise on standardized parts that might have been mass manufactured. And that idea of customized products for individuals is really where 3D printing is kind of headed in the next few years. Printers are becoming faster and more automated, so making custom parts in large volumes is becoming more affordable. One great example of this, at Formlabs, we've partnered with a company, and what they do is they create custom earbuds. So you can get a 3D scan of your ear. Then they print out they basically print out the model of the inside of your ear. So basically a mold for a custom earbud, and then they use those prints as the positive molds to create custom earbuds that are custom fit for your ear. So these types of things really change the way that consumer products are designed. Instead of having generic, mass-produced products that are kind of a compromise and have to work and don't work quite for everyone, you can have these very unique custom products that are designed specifically for you, and you can make them in large quantities. And one of the ways that that's applied today is actually in dentistry. So you or a friend of yours might have had these clear aligners or retainers, And the way that they actually make those is they take a 3D scan of your mouth to get a scan of your teeth. They 3D print that scan, and then they vacuum form a sheet of plastic over that printed scan. And that's how they end up making things like aligners and retainers. And every single one has to be customized to each single patient and each single person, because that's the nature of the product. And so there's some examples of mass customization like this that exist today, and I'm expecting to see those kinds of things scale as 3D printing becomes uh, more utilized in manufacturing and in product design. So in general, those are kind of the three big ways that 3D printing has an impact on manufacturing. It helps companies iterate more to create better products more quickly. It enables efficient manufacturing ramp up, so it brings products to market faster, and it allows for these unique customized solutions that are tailored to the needs of specific customers. And one of the cool ways that I actually use 3D printing personally is on BattleBots in Valkyrie, the robot that I work on. We have over 40 3D printed parts on Valkyrie. About 10 of them are metal 3D printed. The rest are printed in high strength plastics. And we actually print over 300 parts total during each build season when we're preparing for a new season of BattleBots. A lot of those 300 parts are prototypes. A lot of them are tooling and fixturing. So this is actually a drill jig that we printed. Since we needed a kind of odd angled hole in one of our parts, we printed a drill jig so we could drill that hole out. And we actually brought printers to the event. We bring printers every year to support teams with spares and repairs. And I was talking about the design process before. I apply that even in BattleBots. One of the issues that we had during one of our fights was we have one of our drive motors right here, and we discovered that when we would hit another robot really hard, our base plate would actually come up and bump the bottom of this motor, and that would dislodge the brushes of the motor and render the motor useless. And so what we did is we actually 3D printed this little brace on site, and we stuck it under the motor to support it and to prevent the base plate from bumping up against the motor again. And so this is a really great example because it really shows the design process at work. Every single fight, whether or not we win or lose, we learn something. There's all these little kinks in the robot that we're always learning about. We're always trying to work out and improve every single year. And with 3D printing, we can do that on site. If we didn't have these printers on site, we would have had to figure out how to get this machined, or we would have had to figure out how to involve this in the next iteration of the robot for the next season. But there are a lot of little ways like this where even just a simple part like this was really, really quick to make, to install on the robot, and it ended up working for the remainder of the season. And this is what I love about the design process and about robotics in general, is that there's always these ways that you can learn every single time you have a system. You design the system, you build the system, you test it, you learn something, and you can apply that to making it better and better and better year over year. And that's really the value of hands-on experience. It provides this exposure to real-world testing methodologies. Every single time you go through this process, whatever you're building, you learn something, you build on your experience, and you can apply that to anything else you're building next. And it further motivates, at least for me, to try new things, because every single time I go through this design process of identifying a problem, designing a solution, manufacturing a design, and then testing out whatever I've designed, it's always just exciting, and it's very rewarding because I can see myself getting better and designing more and more complicated things every time. And that's also why I love robotics. It's this really, really nice intersection of hardware, electronics, and programming. And so there's all these different ways where it's really interesting to get involved, and there's really, really interesting challenges. So being able to design and make robotic systems, one of the reasons why I studied robotics engineering in the first place was really because of that intersection where you're working across these different disciplines and you're learning in each of these different ways to build better systems and make them work more reliably, make them work better every time you build them. And Robotics is also a really great way to get into engineering and kind of get hands-on. There's these small robot fighting competitions that are all over the country, and they're a really great way to start learning. If you're looking for a project, you're looking for a way to get hands-on and for a way to try designing something, to try making something for the first time. There's all these small robot fighting events with weight classes that range from 1 pound to 30 pound. They're all really fun to go to, even to just watch. And whenever you're ready to start building your own robot, it's really great fun. Every time I build smaller robots in addition to Valkyrie, and I fight in these competitions, and um, it's always a really enjoyable experience because every single time I compete with a robot, I end up learning something or testing out a different strategy and really using that to develop my manufacturing knowledge and develop my engineering and design skill set, to improve and to iterate and to come back better next time. So it's a really great experience, win or lose, because you always end up learning something, and the community is always helping you uh, build uh, build your robots better. Um, and one of the specific ways that you can do that is through the National Robotics League. So this is a league that is partnered with NTMA, and it's meant for students. It's meant for young people like you, where you can work with your classmates, work with your friends to actually get this hands-on design, engineering, and fabrication experience. So they have 15-pound robot fighting tournaments where you can come with a designed and built robot as part of a school club or as part of a school team, and come and compete. So you can check out gonrl.org for more information on that. And again, it's a really great way to learn. It's a really great way to get started, getting your hands dirty and trying things out. And that's what I love about robotics, and that's what I love about trying to design new things. Is just the whole learning cycle of trying something, seeing what breaks, figuring out how to fix it, and using that to improve your next design, your next year, your next competition, is really what makes these events really special, because there's always room for learning. All right, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy this talk, and I'll be available for questions.